Hi, low self-esteem is very common, and it's becoming more of a thing these days. More and more people are becoming aware of low self-esteem and what we can do about it. Now, a lot of videos on YouTube address low self-esteem, and they address low self-esteem from the point of view of fixing, which is all good and great. And I have another video attached with this one, which will look at that side of things of fixing low self-esteem. This particular video is obviously about fixing self-esteem, but it's also about giving you an overview as to why you have self-esteem issues and what you really have to change to have a long-term cure, okay? So we can take the approach that most videos have, which is do this, this, and this, which is good, but because there's usually a lack of awareness of what low self-esteem really is and the big picture view of how to fix it, often these things can fail in the long term. So if you really want a long-term solution to your low self-esteem issues, please dive in with this video. It will give you the perspective you need. So where do we begin with low self-esteem? Where we begin with low self-esteem is understanding or realizing what it is. And self-esteem is basically self-worth, how you feel about yourself, your self-worth as a person. Now, the first thing to understand about self-worth is that it's arbitrary. It's not objective. It's not an objective reality. It's thoughts and ideas about yourself which have been programmed into your mind. We have a conscious mind and subconscious mind. So the person watching this video, this is your conscious self, but you also have the subconscious self. So the subconscious self is that part of you which drives the car, which washes the dishes. It's the habitual self. It's the part of you that keeps your body working while you're sleeping, etc. Now, there's many psychical structures which are created in the subconscious mind over time. And basically, the first 8 years of life, we developed a personality. And one of the psychical structures is called the inner critic. Now, the inner critic gets bad press because it's obviously seen as this self-critic, okay? But actually, it's got a good side and a bad side. The good side of the inner critic is conscience, and the bad side of the inner critic is obviously criticism. And how it's developed is arbitrary. So, for example, as a small child, you go to grab the pot of water, and your mom or dad says, "Don't do that," and you obviously for your safety, you go to run out in front of a car. Don't do that, okay? So again, it's for your safety. We also have things like your small kid goes to a class, they're jumping up and down. How can the teacher possibly teach? So it says, sit down, okay? So the child learns how to behave. We look at young children, 5, 6, 7 years of age, they often follow a lot of rules and regulations because that's what they pick up. Is stand up, sit down, be a good boy, be a good girl, etc. And this is how the conscience basically develops. And some is very good. So for example, a small child grabs, the other child has a nice ruler, a nice pen, a nice apple or chocolate bar or something, they grab it. And then the parent or the teacher says, "Oh, why are you doing that? How would you feel if somebody robbed your pen or your ruler or whatever," okay? And the child starts thinking about it. They develop guilt and they develop conscience, which is great because we want people in society who obey the rules. We don't want people who are robbing us. We don't want people who are cheating us. We want good people, which is great. And most people tend to follow the rules and feel guilty when they don't, which is good. So conscience is very good. But the other side effect of conscience is, of course, inner criticism and the guilt that goes with inner criticism. Okay? So your self-esteem is also tied in with the inner critic. Your self-esteem is an arbitrary structure based in with this criticism about how I feel good about being me. And it's very useful in a way, but we have to realize that it's programmed to a certain degree. So the thing with the arbitrary nature of self-esteem is that you can have self-esteem in one aspect of your life, but be lacking self-esteem in another aspect of your life. So one person might be good at relationships, but they can't hold down a job. Another person might be good at sports, but they can't do well at relationships, and so on and so forth. So most of us lack self-esteem in some areas. Some of us lack self-esteem in all areas. Now on paper, it seems very easy to cure self-esteem. You get rid of negative thoughts, you boost yourself, you feel better. But the problem or the failure with positive thinking is that you can boost yourself as much as you want, but you've got a thing called a paradigm in your mind. And the paradigm is what you think and feel about your reality. And this, no matter how much positive thinking you have, unless you change your paradigm, you can't change your reality. So I used to work in sales, for example. I would try and boost myself. I'd read books and do all sorts of exercise. And then I'd go up to do the presentation or make the call, and the blood would drain from my face. and I would lose all my confidence. We see people doing that when they're trying to maybe talk to a member of the opposite sex. They're trying to make a date with somebody. We see this all the time with a person maybe going for a job interview or making a presentation or whatever. So different things for different people. So the reason you're here is obviously that to some degree you think your self-esteem is lower. And I do believe that we do have to do this thing like reducing negative thoughts and boosting ourselves. But let's just take a look at the nature of self-esteem in this video to understand why it can be difficult to cure self-esteem. Because really the only real good self-esteem will be a self-esteem that's bulletproof, a self-esteem that's not affected by the ups and downs of life, by how much money's in your bank account or how good looking you are, any of these things. It has to be a self-esteem which really is based upon some inherent belief within your person. And I think one way we can take a look at it is look at some of the concepts around self-esteem. So here's some interesting concepts we can think about. Self-esteem versus self-concept. Okay, so self-esteem is feeling worthy about yourself. Self-concept is the idea you have about yourself, what kind of person you are and what kind of world you have, okay? So where this comes into play, the idea of self-concept is the way you think about yourself in life, the way you, what kind of person you think you have, what kind of value you have as a person, okay? So for example, let's say somebody like Adolf Hitler, for example, okay? Adolf Hitler was obviously a very evil man. Yeah, true, I've read some of the things he's written about, and he seems to be quite an aware individual. He's quite aware of what kind of person he was, and he's quite aware of the acts that he was doing. Yet I reckon that Adolf Hitler probably had pretty good self-esteem. And the reason he had pretty good self-esteem was because his self-concept was that the Jews are bad, the Jews are causing all the problems, and no matter what he does, how many people he kills, how many people he tortures, it's okay, because for the big picture, in the grand scheme of things, what he's doing is right. As far as I can see, certainly what he wrote about explicitly, he felt he was right. So here we see somebody whose self-concept is, I'm basically evil, but what I'm doing is basically for the good. Therefore, I have self-worth and high self-esteem. So, you see, you think that somebody like that wouldn't have high self-esteem. But lots of evil people, ruthless people have high self-esteem because their self-concept, the way they think about themselves, makes them feel worthy. Because in their worldview, they're justifying what they're doing. They're doing good. Now, you could take somebody else who's a very worthy person, a very good person. But their self-view about themselves is limited. Maybe they're raised in a family that doesn't have a lot of fun. Maybe they're always working all the time, or they're always studying all the time. And maybe the parents never said, good job, son, good job, daughter, whatever. And so their self-concept is flat, limited. Nobody ever said that they're worthy of anything. Nobody ever said they're good. Or maybe they only got tanked when they won. They only got tanked when they got number one in their state or their country or something like that. And for a lot of these individuals, although they're terribly worthy and very often they're very virtuous people, they might well have low self-esteem because they don't have a broad view of themselves. In their values, in their worldview, they don't count much because they don't feel they're doing good, even though they're doing great, because nobody ever told them they were good. Or maybe they don't have much of a personality, so there's no sense of perspective. Life for them is very boring because life for them is maybe very limited. So over the years, for example, I've met some families where nobody in the family seems to have a personality. Now that sounds really bizarre, but it's true. And what I feel happens here sometimes is you have families where nobody in the family talks. Nobody in the family holds a conversation. Nobody in the family, there's no talking, expressing. The parents never ask how you're doing. They never ask them to do well. They never ask them to explain how they're getting on in life and so on and so forth. So they end up with this very boring, limited personality, and they constantly need some level of stimulation, or they have low self-esteem. They only feel good in certain situations where there's some external stimulation. So often these sort of people, they can't be on their own. They're never really happy unless maybe they're with a group of people or the group is happy or there's some activity going on, but they can't just sit and be happy with themselves because their personality is actually very, very small. So I'm giving you two examples there. One is the example of somebody who's a great person, but is incapable of appreciating it, therefore they don't feel good about themselves and they're low self-esteem. And the other person is somebody who has no problem with themselves, but their worldview is so small that they're pretty bored with themselves and they don't have any get up and go because there was never any interaction. So this is where self-concept has an effect on self-esteem. Another one we have is self-esteem and self-confidence. A lot of people have self-confidence in certain areas, like you might have somebody in school and they're really good at maths and they have great confidence in maths. Somebody else might have great confidence in sports. Somebody else might have great confidence in running a business. But they don't have self-esteem where they don't have confidence. As a rule of thumb, we tend to feel worthy about ourselves where we feel confident at what we do, okay? So as a rule of thumb, most people will lack self-esteem in an area where they lack confidence. And there's another caveat here, and this is people who are incompetent but very confident. I've met a few of these over the years as well. These are sort of people who are useless people, but they think really highly of themselves, usually narcissistic type of people, often living in a dream world, and they think they're great. And that's a weird thing. Many of these people have really high self-esteem because they are convinced that they are great. And they are convinced that they are great because they have self-confidence for whatever reason. Now, the traditional narcissistic person has self-confidence simply as a compensation. They have a compensation in their mind. They don't feel so good about themselves. And they compensate by boosting themselves subconsciously and creating this narcissistic personality. But also some people live in a bubble. They live in a funny old world where they just think they're great. A lot of this comes down to your parents, of course. I mean, if you have parents who keep boosting you, you'll tend to feel confident. And so here we see a case of somebody who is incompetent, yet has high self-esteem. Of course, the only problem with that is, okay, that person will have high self-esteem, but they might find that they don't do so well in life. They keep getting them bumped out of jobs and so on because they're convinced of their greatness. And in the long term, if they have some awareness, they might start becoming aware that this isn't working for them, that maybe I'm not as good as I thought. Maybe. Okay, I'm just saying. So confidence is a strange one. The other one we have is the final concept I'd like to talk to you today is called self-esteem and positive psychology. And I'd like this quote from a guy here called Martin Seligman. 1990s came out with the idea of positive psychology. This is how we can, rather than using psychology to criticize people, using psychology to boost people. And he created a concept called eudaimonia, which is the idea of the Greek word for good life. How can we use psychology to live the good life? And this is very much in keeping what we're doing here in Psychologics, which is how can we live a better life using psychology? Here's a little quotation he has. I am not against self-esteem, but I believe that self-esteem is just a meter that reads out the state of the system. It is not an end in itself. When you're doing well in school or work, when you're doing well with the people you love, when you're doing well in a play, the meter will register high. When you're doing badly, it will register low. And this is the big thing, okay? So yeah, we have a few varieties. We can have the weird thing of an evil person who has high self-esteem because in their value system, they're justified. We can have the person who, of course, is a good person, but is guilty all the time, okay? Like I was raised a Roman Catholic, we're made to feel guilty all the time. That holds you back. We have people who are confident and have self-esteem in some areas of life, but lack confidence and are not so good in self-esteem in other areas of life. And of course, there's some damn fools out there who just got buckets of confidence, loads of self-esteem, but they're idiots. But the key thing here, I feel, is what Martin Seligman is saying, is the problem with self-esteem is it's a register. And I give you an example. Back in 2008, 2009 in Ireland, where I come from Ireland, we had a big economic downturn, of course. And a lot of millionaires killed themselves. And I always thought that was amazing because, I was never wealthy, I was never a millionaire. And it always seemed to me pretty logical that even if you're a millionaire and you went bankrupt, You might have a big house. If you used your head, you probably put some of your assets in the name of some relatives and stuff. So even if the liars come in and take off your money, you'll probably have some money somewhere else or some assets. You'll have something. And you'll probably still be way better set up than the average person. So logically speaking, a financial downturn and losing your money is not the end of the world for a millionaire. Surely you can build it back up. And surely if you have any head and shoulders at all, you'll have bought a few assets, preferably in somebody else's name, so that you won't be completely lost. And all you need is a few houses or buildings or something in somebody else's name. You can get some money from that and start another business. Surely you're still way ahead of the average Joe or Joanne who's struggling to just have anything to start any kind of business. So these people were not following objective reality. What actually happened was their self-concept was based in the idea of having success, of having a certain car, a certain house, and showing off. And once they lost this, they lost all their self-worth. They lost all their self-esteem, and some of them drove themselves to committing suicide. Now, of course, I know suicide is more complex than that, but I'm just saying in some cases. So if you really want self-esteem, yes, we can follow tips and tricks to boost self-esteem, which is namely reducing self-criticism, boosting ourselves. But also we have to have a self-esteem that is not based upon being confident in some things but not confident in others, or having some silly ideas about yourself, or living in your own reality. There must be a self-esteem that is truly impenetrable. And I think this brings us on to the last concept I want to talk to today, which is about self-esteem and compassion. So self-esteem and self-compassion means having a compassion for yourself, seeing that there's some specialness that you have that's unique. Because the world we live in today is a very commercial world, and everything's about being something better than the other guy, For example, I like weight training, okay? And it's slightly disturbing when I look at YouTube, because YouTube is full of people lifting gigantic weights and having six-packs and doing amazing things. And I've been training for a long time. I can't lift gigantic weights and I don't have a six-pack and all this sort of stuff. And the same thing, you look at Instagram and see all these super beautiful people and all this sort of stuff. The problem with a lot of what we see today in social media and so on is people who simply are better than us. And I'm not joking, they objectively are. They've got a higher IQ, they're better looking, they've got a more performing body, they've got a better business brain, they can be a better communicator. Any way you look at it, a lot of these people simply are better than us. And that sucks. So what are we going to do about it? So this is where the self-compassion comes in, whereby we start realizing that our worth is attributeless. It's a special worth. A worth that we only have because of who we are. I'll give you another example I like to quote sometimes. We look at a young baby. We think how amazing that baby. Everybody loves young baby. We all think that baby's amazing. We look at an old person, and it's almost like, I wish they'd go off and die. There's something about old people that we don't like. They're ugly. They smell. They don't think straight. Sometimes you have to wipe their bottoms, all this sort of stuff. But surely young babies. I mean, I'm a father. I had a young baby once, and my baby used to sleep all the time and get up and I have to change the nappy and stuff. They don't do much, and we love them, think they're fantastic. So it's very strange that somebody can be old, and they're no different. Their attributes just like a baby. Okay, the baby's cuter looking, but similar attributes. You know what I mean? So why do we love the baby and hate the old person? And maybe it's evolution. Maybe the evolution is we must nurture the baby so the baby will grow up and look after us in the future. And maybe we don't want to look after the old person, so they'll die and make way for new people. I don't know. But it seems to me that the love that we have for a baby is attributeless. We love the baby because it's the baby. We hate the old person because of attributes. We don't like the attributes of somebody who's ugly, or somebody who's not as clever as they used to be, or not as, when you see somebody who's quite old, after a while, near the end stages, their mind often dulls and they're not as witty and interesting as they used to be. And so it seems to me that we judge with two different sets of rules. We judge the old person by the attributes. Say, well, you're not good looking. You ain't making any money. You can't look after yourself. You're not much fun to be around anymore. And yet we look at the baby and say, you're just a baby. You're just a beautiful baby. Okay? So what we have to look for with compassion is look within ourselves and find within ourselves the inner unique essence that I am an individual and there's something special about me. And you might think that's impossible, but it's not impossible with babies. 99 people out of 100 automatically feel this way about babies. I know everybody doesn't, but most people automatically like babies. Now you might like to be stuck with a baby, but we tend in general, yeah, you're a little baby. We tend to like babies, okay? So we are capable of attributeless love when it comes to some beautiful little baby. But are we capable of attributeless love when it comes to ourselves? Now, I'm not saying it's easy to love yourself, but I'm not talking about positive thinking here. I'm talking about learning to love yourself as a special consciousness which you are. Because consciousness is like a strip of awareness. Now, somewhere along the way, a personality develops, like little ripples in that consciousness. But the consciousness itself is like a screen that observes. We are observing around us. We are consciously observing around us. And even the ripples in that consciousness are somewhat unique. Now, if we're living in the modern age and we're weighing everything up on how much money we have in the bank and how pretty we are and how entertaining we are and how funny we are and how clever we are, all attributes, then we are cruising for a bruising. And the reason we're cruising for a bruising is that we're basing our self-esteem upon things we're going to lose. Somewhere along the way, we're going to lose our beauty. Somewhere along the way, we're not going to be as sharp as we used to be in the latter stages of old age. Somewhere along the way, we mightn't have so much money. And somewhere along the way, or even our physical body will have to go and we'll have to die. So every attribute we have today, we'll have to lose at some stage. Which means if our self-esteem is attached to an attribute, then our self-esteem will go. That's why you see a lot of people, usually men, who once they retire, their self-esteem goes because their self-esteem was tied up in their job. Now, I'm not saying this is easy, and I have no exact answer for you how to do this, because this is like the impossible question that's very difficult for anybody to answer. But what I am saying to you is that the only true self-esteem can come from having a level of self-compassion toward yourself, whereby you are aware of your worth because you are an individual consciousness. Aware right here, right now. And that makes you very special because there's no two of you. Even if you have a twin, the twin has a different consciousness, a different awareness. They might have similar thoughts, but not the same thoughts. They might have similar feelings, but not the same feelings. You are a unique individual. You are a unique beacon of light upon this earth. You are special. And the problem is we tend to say this in a condescending way, you're special. And obviously we don't appreciate that. But really, you are special. So the only way we can have a self-esteem which is bulletproof is when we start appreciating ourselves, not for our attributes, but for who we really are deep down inside. One of the things which might help us when we think about this is that if we think of like a lion or a tiger or a bear or something, these creatures also have a conscious awareness. But they do not have a self-reflective conscious awareness. They can think about things, they have thoughts and feelings, but they can't think about the past or the future or sit back and think, ooh, what do I think about that? This self-reflective trait is left to us lot, human beings. We have this. And because we have the self-reflective state, this is why we suffer. And we might say, why do I have this mind that suffers? And it's true, we suffer a lot. Our mind gives a lot of sufferings. But also, we're the only creature on earth that I know of, I could be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, we're the only creature on this earth that has the mind that's capable of appreciating. When you look at nature and beauty, you can appreciate, okay? If you think about it, if you believe in God, maybe God created human beings so that human beings could appreciate the creation. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? So in the next video that goes with this, we talk about the different techniques you can try to boost your self-esteem. But I just thought I would share first with this video the overview that ultimately they'll all fail in the long term. Because although you can get rid of negative thoughts and boost yourself and have positive feedback and so on, as so long as your self-esteem is based upon, your self-worth is based upon arbitrary interpretations of events and experiences, it's doomed to fail, because these external things have to go eventually. The only thing that can give you long-term peace of mind from birth to death, the only thing that can give you self-worth from birth to death, the only thing that can give you self-worth and self-esteem in the face of death is self-compassion. It's a self-compassion that you are a unique being, that you are a unique awareness, and there'll never be another one of you. And when you can think of that, when you can remember that, no matter what situation is happening around you, then you have true self-esteem. I'll give a final story before I go, and sometimes this pops into my head. You might have heard of a Roman Catholic saint called Maximilian Kolbe. I think he's a saint, or he was on the way to sainthood. The Roman Catholic Church has funny ideas about making a saint hundreds of years after he died. But still, it's a great story whether he's a saint or not. Anyway, basically, Maximilian Kolbe was a Roman Catholic priest in World War II. And he was rounded up with various people in concentration camps. And some people escaped from a concentration camp. And the commandant decided to shoot 10 men or kill 10 men for each man that escaped. And so 10 men were going to be put to death. And one guy was upset because of his family. And so Maximilian Kolbe just stood up there and says, I don't have a family. I'll die instead of him. And so he did. And funny enough, they put him in a room, I think, without food or water for 2 weeks, and all the other guys died, but he was still alive. The only guy that survived for the 2 weeks, and they had to then give him a chemical injection to kill him. Now you might say it doesn't really matter, it's a concentration camp, probably going to die anyway, but you know, when you're in that situation, when you know you're the one that's going to be put into the room to die, how many people stand up and do what he did? I don't care, the Roman Catholic priest or who the hell they are. Most people won't do it. I'm not sure if I would do it. But that to me is an example of ultimate self-compassion. That is an example of super self-esteem. Self-esteem, they can say, okay, I'll do it. I'll sacrifice because it makes more logical sense for me to do it than the other guy. He's more to lose than me. You see what I mean? That was a human being in a full level of self-esteem, total self-worth, willing to consciously sacrifice himself for others. That's the sort of thing we're talking. That's real self-esteem, okay? Not the beating your chest. We can all beat our chest when we've got $1 million in the bank account. We can all beat our chest when we're young and beautiful. But can we beat our chest when we're old? Can we beat ourselves in our chest when we're in the concentration camp? That's real self-esteem. So let's think about that. Check out the other video to give a look at the techniques and so we can do to boost self-esteem. But I think that's the real self-esteem, real self-worth, is realizing that there's just one of me, and that makes me special, no matter what. Think about that.